think I don't want.
Madam Chair, Councillor Lindell, we are live.
Thank you very much. I'll call this meeting to order. It is 5:03, the June 5th meeting of the Finance Committee. Can we have a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Cassett. Here. Councillor Lindell.
Here.
Councillor Rivera.
Here.
Councillor Villarreal.
Present.
Councillor Romero Worth.
I'm here.
For some reason, our TV went off, but
Ben, we have a technical issue with the TV here.
you're, I think
So
we-
my voice is coming down from on high.
well, it was, now we can see you. So whatever you're doing, stop it.
And
Okay,
Chair,
we're
you-
ready to
you do
go.
have a
We've
quorum.
got, yeah.
Yep, you do
on
have
the
a
big
quorum.
screen. So we've had a roll call. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff,
No, Chair, no changes from staff.
from the committee?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Okay, we're on to the consent agenda, and we have one item that's been pulled, and that is item S. Even though staff may not be here to respond, are there any other items that need to be pulled? Okay, can I have a motion on that?
Move to approve as amended. Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Thank you. So presentations, we're going to have an audit update and then a presentation on procurement. So would you like to start, Ms. Oster?
Thank you, Chair Lindell. Before I start the audit update, I just wanted to circle back onto the votes on the agenda. I wasn't able to hear Councillor Romero Worth. I think I heard everyone in the room.
Are you okay with the agenda, Councilor Romero?
Yes, I voted yes on everything to this
Okay.
moment.
Okay, perfect. So for the approval of the agenda and the approval of the consent agenda.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Regarding the audit update, I am pleased to report that we are continuing our steady progress. We have Clifton Larson Allen and Carr Riggs Ingram working on site this week. Carr Riggs Ingram is continuing to wrap up their loose ends on FY21 and working on the component units of SWAMA and BDD. Clifton Larson Allen is working on wrapping up items on FY22 and preparing for the FY23 year-end close, which will occur at the end of this month, and opening FY24 up in Munis for business after June 30th. And Chair Lindell, with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I don't see any, so let's move on to the next presentation. And that would be a procurement presentation by Travis Dutton Leda.
And Chair, this is Emily. I would like to introduce our Chief Procurement Officer, our Purchasing Officer, Travis Dutton Leda. He joined the city earlier this year and we were delighted to have him. I think this presentation is going to be very helpful. He's going to talk to you about RFP process and procurement. And I'm just very, very excited to have Travis on board and helping us in this role, leading the purchasing group.
Please
Thank
proceed.
you. Madam Chair, councilors, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is definitely new to me, so pardon my heart.
You're doing fine.
Thank you. So I was asked to present on a few things and first to introduce myself and then to go over a few things that I thought might be helpful. I guess the general idea would cover, I guess, a broad range of different understandings of procurement. So I'm not too sure how deep your knowledge is. So I've made a lot of assumptions here, so forgive me if this is stuff you already know, but hopefully it's helpful. So so here's a quote from Julia Gilliard. Being a public servant is not just not a job, it's a calling. It can be tough, but it's also one of the most rewarding jobs in the world. You have the power to make a real difference in people's lives and help create a better society for all. So that's kind of my heart. And so I never knew that I was gonna like procurement. I didn't grow up saying, I want to be a procurement officer when I grow up, or chief procurement officer for the city of Santa Fe. I didn't say that. I didn't even know I wanted to work for the city of Santa Fe until I got here. So, but it's definitely rewarding in many ways. So introduction. So I'll tell you a little bit about me and a little bit about the presentation. Go over some definitions and abbreviations. I actually changed that. It's called something else, but I didn't update it here. I'm sorry. Some primary goals for the presentation and for procurement long-term. Some areas of growth, the timeline to discuss. I think a really important piece of the process, which is confidentiality. Then the summary. So introduction. I'm Travis Dutton Lyda. I was born, no. So I was at the state for 13 years. I worked at state purchasing. I started off as a receptionist, kind of. I was there on light duty because I got hurt, and then moved up slowly about 9 different times. And then learned a lot about procurement and public service. And then came here. Made a pretty big leap. There's a lot of differences, but been good so far. The purchasing office is currently comprised of a procurement analyst, a contracts supervisor. Our procurement manager is off doing the auction, so that position is kind of in a way vacant, but he's there in spirit, he tells us. And then we have a contractor, Kathy. So we're kind of light when it comes to positions, but we're able to get a lot done. And then my vision for purchasing long-term is to, well, I guess even now, just customer service, I think. Customer service, training. I want to get everybody on board. I want to streamline our processes. I want to make sure we're all telling the same story, providing the same information every time we speak to somebody. Even within a small department or division, I've seen sometimes we can provide mixed communication. So I want to make sure we're telling the same story. Next is primary goals. So public service, like I said, my heart is public service. And then, so all of these bullet points kind of go together. So we're all on the same team. Even though purchasing might be a pain point for some people, it's a big part of the process, I think. Well, I know, not just because the laws are there, but we kind of protect the city from themselves, kind of like you do. You know, we make sure everything's checked and balanced and audited, and we prevent things, I guess, bad things from happening. You know, we protect ourselves, right? So this presentation, I hope for you all and people watching, and maybe people that watch eventually down the road, can see kind of like how we want the perception of procurement to be. And so I think this presentation isn't just for you, it's for also for city staff and the public. So there's reasons that we're here and we want to be helpful. We want to help everyone. Like I said, we want to help everyone understand the value of procurement in the process. So starting off, I've noticed that when the contracts come to you all to when they're presented in front of you, it's kind of like at the tail end of the process. The vendor's already selected, the project's already been like designed or ready for kickoff. So I was thinking maybe if you're open to it, we have all of our solicitations listed on our website. You have this presentation, that's the link. I'm sure you already know it, but this is kind of a way for you all to get involved in the beginning, at least just to kind of look at things that are being processed. And then if you see something that you are interested in, to know more about, or maybe you see a concern, and you can notify me. We can work together. And then for long-term goals, I want to modernize. So I've been, in my past role, I was in charge of implementing e-procurement systems and designing different types of management systems. Currently, we don't have anything. So we were using only email until I got here, and then we switched to SharePoint or share file, and then Teams. So we're going to start accepting submissions through Teams. We're testing it now. It was previously only done through email. So with a lot of emails, things get lost. So we've come up with a pretty good way to track things in Teams, and we're probably going to move forward after the end of the fiscal year. My team asked me not to make any big changes right now before the end of the fiscal year. So we'll make that change later. And then we have an e-procurement system that we're testing. It's a module of Munis that we've already paid for, so we have it. I just want to turn it on. And staffing, I think long-term, I would like to see more staff to be able to service the city quickly and efficiently. So more FTEs, hopefully someday. Training, we want to provide training to all departments. And consistency. So again, I want to be consistent, all of us in purchasing. And then of course, customer service. So it's a current and long-term goal. So I provided lots of text here. I was told, Aaron told me to reduce it to bullets, so I'm sorry. The item, I did modify the item, but I didn't reduce it down, so I'm sorry. So we have a lot of important statutes and that we're governed by, but I figured for this presentation, one really important thing is confidentiality. And I've noticed that it's kind of difficult to manage because we have a public forum, and so sometimes, so I guess my suggestion, my suggestion is to discuss things in executive, what's it called? Executive sessions. So if you need to discuss, obviously, you know this, but if you need to discuss, there is a statute that allows you to discuss proposals in executive sessions. And then the announcement of the award will happen here in the open meeting. So that's the exception, 10-15-1H6, and then the statute that governs the confidentiality of proposals that discusses that the proposals are confidential from submission to award is 13-1-116. Then, yeah, like I said in the beginning, I made a bunch. First, I added these because I was learning. I've had to learn a lot about the process, the committee's processes and governing body process is different to me. And then also people attending via Zoom or the audience might be helpful. So I won't go over these. They're there. Something that was requested that I discuss is resident preference. So on procurements that are going to use state funds, we have to use the state preference. For city funded contracts, we have to use the city preference, which is in ordinance and in the procurement manual. And then for federally funded procurements, we don't use any preference. So I think so areas of growth, the executive session, discussing confidential information can be done during that time. So something that I've noticed in the city is the communication could be a little bit better, I think, like with staff and then members of the RFP evaluation committee. Instead of kind of providing all of the information during the process when it's confidential, we can use statements like we're evaluating, we're getting close to award, we expect to have a decision by, things like that, instead of like openly discussing the evaluation. So I personally think that more confidentiality is better. It's not technically wrong because the statute just says that we can't let the other offers know the contents of the proposals of the other offers proposals. So, but I think the less people that know, the more we can control it. That way it doesn't get out. So during the RFP evaluation process, we go through a discussion of confidentiality. We have the committee sign confidentiality standards agreements. And then the city procurement buyer keeps those. So if at any time a person needs to know the contents of the proposals, we can go through that process. We can have subject matter expert or somebody that needs to know sign the agreement, and we can release the information. Currently, we're working on a policy so another thing is I want to get things in writing. I want to get things written down and to provide better service. So we're working on a policy that kind of sets expectations for the RFP evaluation. And we'll probably think if the process requires, we'll go through the committees and governing body to get that approved. So here's a simplified evaluation timeline. So on the topic of confidentiality, from the date the proposals are due to award, the proposals should be confidential. So. And, um. My note is gone. So. Kind of gives the. The. An image of the process. So we have an evaluation committee. Then we have this committee and the other committees. So during that whole time, the contents of the proposals should be kept confidential. And then once the award is made, the information is public and except for proprietary information, of course, and financial statements. So we'll connect the pieces. So we'll teach all parties the why of confidentiality, provide consistent how-to guidance, and then steer to the goal. So I think that's relative. So that's relevant for all things that we would like to teach. Just give people the understanding of why it's important and then steer to the goal. So when we find things that are kind of out of alignment, just help steer the submitters to the right direction. And then eventually it'll become second nature. So culture change, and then eventually people at all levels will provide the same information. So summary. So all city departments, government body, and citizens are all on the same page, same team. I think we're all on the same team. I mean, we're working for the citizens, and we're all trying to get the best things possible, best solutions. So my team wants to help. And we have goals to help with the purchasing and procurement process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I've sat on this committee for a lot of years, and I've never had someone from purchasing come over and give us a presentation. So I really appreciate you putting this together and putting in the effort to come down and talk to us about it. I'll open for any questions from the committee. Anybody have any questions? I'm sure if we don't today, I'm sure we will at some point in time, but I really appreciate the slide on page 13, the confidentiality, how we get there, and an explanation of that and the importance of it. So if there's no questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director, I think we only had one item pulled, and that was item S. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair. Item
Okay.
S.
Then let's go ahead and move on to item S. If you will give us an introduction to what that item is.
Certainly.
See, Mr. Sam the man is here.
Item S is a request for approval of amendment number 1 to item number 22-0300, Universal Protection Services, VBA Allied Universal Security, to extend the term to June 30th, 2024, with no corresponding change in cost. And we have with us this evening Sam Burnett, Facilities Division Director, to discuss this item.
So I think that you pulled this, Councilor Villarreal. Do you want to go ahead and ask questions on this?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sam, for joining us. As you know, I usually pull items related to Allied security, now being called or also does business as universal protection, I think. And one of the reasons why I have not supported this contract is because it is an affiliate of G4S, which is it's a global company that has human rights violations, and we had switched away or had gotten away from G4S in my first term because we understood about the issues that with that company. And so they got folded in again as one of the possibilities for our contract services. And in this case, I just had a few questions because from my understanding, the reason why we were considering them is because the airport, that was the only contract that for various reasons, I can't recall exactly the stipulations, but maybe Sam could elaborate why we were considering them even in the pool. And it had to do with some airport requirements. So maybe you could just give us a little bit of background about that and if the airport is using Allied currently, and you could just walk us back.
Yeah, absolutely. Madam Chair, councilors, Councilor Villarreal, you're correct. When we executed the RFP, and actually Karen Gross, who carried us through the RFP process, big thanks to her. One of the 5 respondents was Allied. At the time, Allied was the only security firm in the area that had been through TSA screening and badging and were able to provide security services at the airport. Because of the amount of time we had to execute the contracts following the RFP and how that fell in line with the end of the fiscal year, it was important. We maintained the Allied contract, the continuity of security at the airport, which is a requirement for operations there. Since that time, in recent months, my team has been working with James Harris at the airport and helped them transition from Allied to, I believe, Condor Security. And I believe that that transition is complete. We are processing this contract tonight. In addition, they may be not all coming at the same time because it was complicated getting the contract amendments done, but we are extending or attempting to extend all 4 security contracts because they're all currently in use. So in addition to Allied, we'll have Condor, Servexo, and VetSec also coming through the Finance Committee and the governing body. I believe the reason that Allied ended up on the roster again is because currently our libraries and the Genevieve Chavez Community Center are using Allied for security services. And let me know if I missed any questions.
No, I think that's helpful. And so we don't need them for the airport. We have somebody in place. And you and I talked earlier today, and GCC and the libraries weren't aware of the issues with Allied. So you did speak with them and they said they were willing to make that adjustment as needed with the other contract providers that we have in the pool. So is that my understanding?
Yeah, Madam Chair, councilors, Councilor Villarreal, absolutely. I didn't speak with the libraries directly, but I spoke with Director Tucker. And she indicated to me that not only was she not aware of the background of the Allied G4S situation, but they've also had some issues with coverage and would be happy to look into alternative services. And one of our project managers, Josh Bowman, reached out to Director Tucker today to talk to her about the other 3 alternatives, Servexo, VetSec, and Condor.
Thank you. And what do you mean by issues with coverage with Allied?
Madam Chair, councilors, Councilor Villarreal, security in general has been a complicated service to manage. And the biggest factor for us is, doesn't seem to matter how many security contractors we have under contract. There seems to be a limited pool of people working in the security industry. And so we're always struggling to achieve total coverage. So if we hire them, say for main library or 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, the kind of regardless of the company, there's often a struggle to fully cover all the shifts. And some of the firms have more struggles than others. And in this case, it sounds like perhaps Allied has.
So if we were to eliminate Allied from the pool, you think that we would be able to get the kind of coverage we need with the other contracts in the pool?
Yeah, I feel, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I do feel confident that, especially since we have a little time to work with the other vendors, we can work to ensure we're able to provide the coverage they're looking for and, shift to alternate services.
Thank you. And I also had talked to other staff members and they had brought up performance issues by Allied. And I think it depends on which department, but I don't know if you could share any anecdotal information about that. So we have a better understanding what performance issues we've seen with Allied.
I have not, I don't have any direct examples. Madam Chair, councilors, excuse me. I don't have any great examples. I know it's been a little over a year since or maybe it's been 2 years since I shifted away from Allied at Midtown and in the rail yard. And I will say that with the providers I'm using now, primarily Condor and some with VetSec, how their staff carries themselves. I think their post orders, their training, their general demeanor and presence in the public has been really well received. We've received a lot of compliments and thanks for various vendors throughout both Midtown and the rail yard with the shift. And so I think maybe it's easier for me to say that the firms we're working with now receive a lot of props. That makes sense.
Rather than Allied.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't support this contract and I guess I'm wondering, there's another, actually, I think there's a couple, but there are other security companies that didn't apply into the first RFP for various reasons. And some of them are actually covering the whole Guadalupe district. And I've heard from in my capacity for that district, some of the businesses have told me they prefer some of the other contractors. So I guess my expectation, or I would like to see us expand the pool and reissue the RFP. So I'm curious what that could look like and when that could occur if we decide to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I don't believe there's anything that prevents us from issuing a new RFP for security services prior to the contracts, the subsequent contracts from the previous RFP expiring. We'd have to work with our new chief procurement officer and figure out the details. At the moment, my project team is fairly busy. So after working through the details, it would likely be sometime in the fall where we would have the bandwidth to engage in another RFP. But if we were to not pass Allied, that is a 25% reduction in the pool of coverage we have, and it would make sense to make an effort to try and expand that pool again to help us make sure we get all the coverage we need.
Well, I'd like to see us consider that for the fall, and until then, just use the pool that we have now with the other contracts that we're seeing in in our packet material, and there may be some coming maybe later. So with that, I will move to deny this contract. Sure.
Let me see if there's any other
Absolutely.
discussion first. Are you done with questioning? Okay. Counselor Cassett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I'm sorry if you scrolling back, I think Councilman Villarreal did ask this and I missed it. If we were to deny Allied, and you said it's a 25% reduction in our pool, how does that impact security around that? Like, what does that really mean, a 25% reduction in our pool, and how that impacts the city?
Absolutely. Madam Chair, counselors, Counselor Cassett, essentially, we have 4 vendors. They're all set up for right around $1 million per year. They were all set up at $1 million per year because that is the average that we were spending per year on contract. So the procurement office at that time said, set up every vendor so that they could carry our full capacity in the case that was required. But the reason we did the RFP and have multiple vendors under staff is to give us more diversity and greater ease in covering all our various shifts. When I say there's a 25% reduction, we essentially lose 1 of 4 vendors. We will still have enough essentially financial bandwidth to cover all our security requirements as they stand today easily. And we'll just have to work with the 3 remaining vendors to find the vendors who are able to provide the services currently provided by Allied. So we would just be shifting to other service providers. And I believe, I think that it's reasonable and an accomplishable task. But it is essentially a 25% reduction in our current capacity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And then regarding working with the other 3 vendors, do you have any insight on their capacity at this time? I know you said that Allied seems to be having a bit of a harder time hiring, correct? So, but I know that there's just been a hiring shortage in general. So
Correct. Madam Chair, counselors, Counselor Cassett, quite honestly, and so over the last 3 or 4 years that I've been managing security contractors, something that's become very apparent to me is that, again, there seems to be a limited pool of individuals working in the industry. And I've noticed that a lot of the staff will move from vendor to vendor. And I think when some vendors don't have, aren't, for whatever reason, when there's a need, people seem to be able to hire on staff. I think people will move to firms that are able to offer positions, or the industry seems to expand and contract, or vendors seem to expand and contract based upon need. Am I answering the question or confusing it?
I mean, you're answering the question. It's kind of, it's one of those that I think the answer is probably. And so, I agree with Councilman Villarreal that we have been looking at moving away from Allied for a while and how we start to do that. I think my only concern would be denying the contract without having being able to speak to the other contractors that they would be able to fill that gap. And so I would like to get that confirmation. I don't know how we would go about that.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, counselors, Counselor Cassett, I already have a project manager working on trying to identify the vendors who are able to step in at GCC and the libraries. The 3 other vendors we're working with, Servexo, VetSec, and Condor, are all very responsive. And we should I would assume mid to late week this week, we should have responses and have a sense of who had indicated that they would be able to take on those sites. And I can report back to the counselors in general that those sites did end up with coverage.
Okay. And then taking a look at what we need to make sure that we're covering throughout the city, I kind of see two pathways, either deny and go with the 3 or approve the contract, but try not to use it. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on kind of those two avenues. Again, making sure that there is the coverage that we need. And that's, we're seeing that throughout the city, while also looking at how we get that RFP out in the fall.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Councilors, Councilor Cassett. Speaking frankly from my perspective, I know that we went into issuing this contract with the best intentions of kind of weaning ourselves away. And because there are so many stakeholders inside of the city who have access to these contracts, it's kind of hard to control who accesses them. And having worked with the other vendors, my general sense is I have very little concern that we would be able to find coverage. And that if the intention was to move away from using a particular vendor, I would recommend probably taking that step rather than half steps, for lack of a better word.
Got it. Thank you. That was a very helpful answer. I do appreciate it. I have no further questions.
Counselor Romero Worth, do you have questions? Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just to follow up. So this particular amendment is to extend the term to June 30th, 2024,
Yes.
which is a while. So if we did a what do you all call it? Reissuing of a RFP, say in the fall, does that then end this term if you reissue?
I
How
don't
does that
think so.
work?
I would defer to the chief procurement officer, who may not want to answer that right on the spot, but my understanding is once we execute an RFP and there are subsequent contracts, those contracts and their terms are fixed until they expire, which they all max out at 4 years unless they're not renewed because they're set up to renew annually. Issuing another RFP to bring on additional similar type services, I don't see why it would negate the existing contracts. It would give us an opportunity. It would give us an opportunity to bring on new vendors. The one thing that it could do that would be unintended is existing vendors could probably reply. It's complicated, and I think we'd probably have to sit down and look at all the details. I don't think it would negate the contracts, but there might be some complications to work through if we had vendors applying a second time. I don't know how that would work, but there's some finer details we'd have to work through when the time came. So, thanks.
Yeah, that'd be great to get a procurement perspective.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Can you move your microphone just a little bit up or
Okay.
talk into it?
Okay, there we go.
Thanks.
So if you approve this now, there is the termination clause. So once a new RFP is processed and new awards are made, we could cancel this specific contract. The term, I think Sam did a good job of explaining the term. So they wouldn't automatically cancel once new awards are made. Also, there's a statewide price agreement with a lot of vendors that we could look at and work with those vendors to speed up the process of award, and a new RFP would not have to be done if that was decided, if Sam decides to go that route.
So if we did another reissuing in the fall, we'd have to cancel all of the ones in that pool? No.
I don't think we would, but my preference is not to have duplicate solutions.
Mhm.
So we'd have to think about that.
When you say think about that, you have to figure out a clean way to make that happen.
Yeah, because it's my preference and I don't know how much how much weight that holds, right? Because it's not necessarily wrong to have multiple solutions from multiple different procurements, but it's my preference to not,
Mhm.
right? So.
Got it.
But if we went the statewide price agreement route, we could award additional vendors without having to do a new solicitation.
Okay. I'm just writing that down. So, but that still is up to kind of how we want to approach this contract, which will be extended in this request for another year.
Madam Chair, Councilors, Councilor Villarreal, Travis made a really good point, which is, and I don't know why I didn't think of this, all of our contracts include a termination cause. So if there was concern about reducing our bandwidth, even though we weren't certain about wanting to continue indefinitely with Allied, we could approve this contract, allow the libraries, like kind of ensure the libraries in the Genevieve Chavez Center have an opportunity to transition to somebody else, continue to try and manage the other departments and divisions away from opening new POs with this vendor. Once we have everything kind of worked out in the background, we could then issue, I think it's a 30-day termination notice to Universal, Allied, and terminate their contract at that point. And that's kind of the best of both worlds. Lets us approve it, make sure we have the coverage we need, work to transition away, and then terminate.
Okay, thanks for that option. That's all I have. Yeah.
Counselor Romero Worth, your hand is up.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think Sam's last statement helps with what I'm concerned about, which is, Sam, you mentioned that there are so many people that draw on this contract across the city. And I'm not sure that we know in this moment tonight, all that might be drawing on it and the effect that us not renewing the contract could have on our security services across city government. So I like the option that you've just provided better, in the sense that we know we want to be moving away from this company, or we should be moving away from this company, but allow time to do that and then exercise the termination clause once we know that we have coverage for the city. That's my concern about not renewing this tonight, is that I'm not sure that we understand fully the impact this could have across city government for all the people who do need the security services. And I'd hate to do something that leaves us without the contractors and or the coverage that we might need, especially given the fact that we know there are shortages being experienced, employee shortages being experienced by all the contractors. And as you said, Sam, it's a 25% reduction by eliminating one of the four. So I do like this last option better, which would be to renew it tonight, but with that understanding that we'd start working internally to move away from it and exercise the termination clause. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else? Counselor Cassett?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So Sam, one thing you did say is that what's challenging is that a lot of different departments access this, and so it's kind of hard to control. Maybe this is a question for our deputy city manager, but that sounds like something we should be able to, it sounds like there should be direction from somewhere to say, do not open up a new PO with this contract and please keep moving away.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, that is something that I would definitely defer to the expertise in the finance department for an answer on that. I think it does sound like it does muck up the situation a little bit if we do. So I would defer to the CPO and say that my preference would also to not open a new RFP for, if we don't think it's absolutely
I'm
necessary.
sorry, opening up a new PO for.
No, PO,
Yes,
sorry.
like somebody, yeah. Maybe.
Nope, Sam.
Yeah, Madam Chair, counselors, Madam City Manager, Madam Finance Director. One thing that I could recommend, and we could work with the procurement office, at one point, we had transitioned security from my office over to community health and safety, to their operations manager, who I believe may have moved to another position. So it ended up back in my shop. One thing we can do is work with purchasing to ensure somebody, myself or like my property manager, have signed off on purchase requisitions for security, or they process new POs. And that way, if another one comes through, we can reach out to the applying department or division and have a conversation with them about the opportunities that exist, and kind of help shepherd people in certain directions as we're kind of working through this situation. Does that seem reasonable? I'm getting a good nod over there. Yeah, to just throw that out there. So we'd be happy to do, kind of help manage that as POs are being opened, and, you know, providing guidance to people.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to ask about the language of guidance versus direction. So,
Yeah.
so it's guiding people, you know, at the point of the PO of saying, hey, actually, we're not going to open up new POs. That has been the directive from the governing body. We're going to be opening with somebody else. So
Yeah.
no to this PO.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilors, Councilor Cassett. Absolutely. And if that's the, you know, if I'm happy to take, we'd be happy to take a firm stance like that.
Okay.
If it were the will of the governing body. Absolutely not a problem.
Okay. I imagine, would we have to? Maybe it's a conversation for offline, how we make this an official will of the governing body.
Counselor Cassett, I don't think that we would have to do anything special, but I would probably defer to legal on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate this. I both would like to move as quickly away from Allied as possible, and also not leave us in a lurch in any way, shape, or form. So I think that middle option might be to really try to actively wean everybody off of it. Anybody who is utilizing it, try to have them move away, and then eliminate cancel the contract when we're able to do so. So thanks for talking about that option. I appreciate it. No more questions.
Thank you. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you. Madam Deputy City Manager, doesn't the city manager meet with all senior staff every Tuesday?
Madam Chair, Counselor Rivera, we do, yes.
Shouldn't that direction be given to all administrative staff and then filtered down to anyone that might do a purchase order?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can also send an email to the city, but we usually flag those types of things during that meeting. So yes.
My recommendation as well is what Director Burnett would do and the procurement office would do. Thank you.
Councilor Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just to clarify, it's not a lot of contracts that, I mean, that this could be open to. You just said GCC and the libraries. And if we're clear about who, you know, a firm stance on how Allied should not be used moving forward, I guess I just don't see the point in approving a contract knowing that we're going to terminate it. It just seems, I don't think that'll lead to litigation because it's put in the contract that we have that clause. It just doesn't make sense to me that we would approve something knowing that we're going to terminate it soon. So that's my stance. And it doesn't seem like a lot that we could transition out and that we can get coverage from the other contractors or the vendors. So my stance still is that we should not approve this contract amendment.
Just
Counselor Rivera.
a clarifying question, was your intention to terminate the entire contract or just the contract with Allied?
Excuse, Madam Chair, Counselor Rivera, just the contract with Allied. We'd maintain the Cervexo, the VetSec and the Condor contracts.
That's what I thought, okay.
Counselor Cassett.
This passed Public Works, Public Utilities, correct?
Caught me off guard. This is the first time it has appeared before a committee or the governing body. So it has yet to go, which I believe is at the end of, it has yet to go to Public Works.
The schedule I have says that it went there on May 30th. Is that incorrect?
I actually did not submit this myself, so you caught me off guard. It may have,
Apologize.
no, that's fine. It may have gone and not gotten pulled. And so
Okay.
this may be its second appearance and my mistake.
Okay, so it's going to governing body, I think is the main, the main purpose is that it'll be at June 14th. And by that time, would maybe there be a little bit more clarity about what a transition might look like? Having spoken to the other vendors, if they could pick this up and speaking to libraries and GCCC about what this would look like. Because I think that, there's that point of wanting to make sure that there's the bases are covered before we pull the plug. And so if we're able to get a little bit more of that information by governing body, I do think that that would be helpful in this discussion.
Madam Chair, counselors, absolutely. I think that I would likely have a clear answer almost certainly by the end of the week that we had other vendors who had the capacity to pick up whatever it was we were looking to get covered.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I would make a suggestion is to maybe move this forward without recommendation from the finance committee, seeing that it will be at governing body anyhow. And it sounds like we will be able to get some more of these questions more clearly answered by then. Thank you, Madam Chair. I could make a motion.
Go ahead and
Yep.
ask questions, please. So there's an elephant in the middle of the room here that I'm unaware of. If we're dissatisfied with the work that this company is doing, why haven't we terminated them? Or are we satisfied with the work that this company is doing? Because I don't know what the real true issue is with the company, but I do know that probably local people are employed by this company. And I don't want to be cavalier in talking about people losing their jobs. So have we been satisfied with the work from this company? And if we haven't, I'm not sure why we haven't terminated them.
Madam Chair, counselors, Counselor Lindell, from my personal experience, I worked with Allied over a number of years, first at Midtown, then at Midtown and a number of other sites. And in the beginning, Allied provided great service. There was a lot of turnover in management. As Counselor Villarreal mentioned, they merged with another company known as, I believe it's G4S, to become one of or the largest security firm in the world. And in that transition period, in my personal experience at that time, the quality of service I received diminished greatly. And so I moved. It was actually the reason that we decided to issue the RFP, was to give me and the sites I was managing an opportunity to move away from Allied. I haven't worked with Allied for a number of years, so my information is secondhand. But in speaking with Director Tucker this afternoon, she indicated that
Director who?
Sanchez Tucker or Tucker, Maria Tucker from, I'm sorry, I may be naming her incorrectly. My apologies. She indicated that at the sites that her team is managing, specifically GCC and the libraries, that they've had issues and are not satisfied. And she was excited by the opportunity to have somebody from my team help her find a new vendor. So the indication to me is that those, the quality of service issues continue.
So, in terms of cost, the other vendors that we use, are these all comparable in cost? Hourly wage, what we pay them on an hourly basis, or do they go ahead and set that? And will this add to, if we only have 3 other contractors and, we've gone through it before where we had a hard time getting security companies. Are we going to be adding to our costs by adding on to overtime that we have to pay?
Madam Chair, Councilors, Councilor Lindell, I have actually not compared the rates of the 4 different contractors. They each submitted their own wage rates when they responded to the RFP, but I think it's fair to say that they're relatively comparable, if not certainly not identical, but they tend to be relatively comparable. I'd be happy to have a spreadsheet put together and emailed out to you all so you can see what that looks like. In terms of overtime, no, we wouldn't pay for overtime. The way security works is it's site by site. And so you would have to have a guard at a particular site working overtime for them to be required to achieve or obtain overtime pay. We would always try to avoid a situation where we decided to sign up with a vendor to provide additional services who was going to do so by saying, we don't have enough staff right now, but you can pay our current staff overtime rates at another site. We would prefer to go to a different vendor and obtain services from them to maintain regular rates rather than overtime rates. Does that make sense?
I just remember when we looked at these very sizable contracts in the past, I think there was some real difference in the hourly rate that different companies brought to us. I would want to see that before I eliminated a company.
Madam Chair, councilors, I will add to the list of information to get back to you a confirmation that other vendors, in addition to confirmation that we have other vendors who can pick up these sites, I will also make sure you guys get a kind of a comparative spreadsheet or matrix showing all the different rates so you can get a sense of who's charging what.
Yeah, I think that that's important. The other part of it is if we have sites that people are dissatisfied with the service that they're getting, why aren't we doing something about that? I mean, to stand around and wring our hands and go, yeah, well, they're on their cell phone all the time and they don't walk around and do it. I mean, that's on us.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that is an indication to me that we aren't holding up our end of it. So I'm not gonna, I don't want to say no to this. I don't want to say yes to it. Councilor Villarreal has the, I'll give her the floor again to make a motion because that was where we started. And I asked that we could go through the discussion first and agreed to come back to that. My preference would be that we don't make a recommendation on this at this point in time. But that may not be how the committee feels, but when we have people that are dissatisfied with the service that we're paying for, that's on us to make sure that we are getting what we're paying for. And I would hope that someone would take note of that and let it be known. So we're back to you, Counselor Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other thing I would like to mention is I've known a couple of people that worked for Allied in the past years, and they are local people and they have quit Allied because they have indicated to me about the poor working conditions in that business. So that's anecdotal. Obviously, that doesn't weigh into how we need to decide on this. You know, my gut is telling me that we shouldn't pass this agreement for another year extension. So that would be my motion, and we can start there. And then if my colleagues don't feel comfortable with that, then we can.
So we
Go
have a
somewhere.
motion not to pass, correct?
Right.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, if it's okay, just want to say that as the Airport Advisory Board Chair, the airport was not happy with the services from Allied. But instead of, they technically did terminate their usage of Allied and went to one of the other companies that's providing services that was a lot more reliable. So, you know, technically, staff will do what they need to by not using Allied if things come up. So, but this seems to make it cleaner. So, thank you.
Just to clarify again, this is heading to governing body regardless of what we do here because it did pass Public Works, but this would essentially put it straight to discussion. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to deny. Do we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Rivera, Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the other votes.
Counselor Cassett voted yes on the motion to deny. Counselor Lindell voted no. Counselor Rivera voted yes. Counselor Villarreal voted yes.
Okay, I'm gonna vote no, and I'd like to explain my vote.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, Counselor Romero Worth, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just, you know, again, I think moving away from this contract is fine. I just am concerned that we're doing it without the guarantee we need to make sure we have the coverage. So I would have rather handled this a little bit differently. But it's not that I don't agree that we should be moving away from this contractor. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. So that takes us on to matters from staff. Any matters? Thank you, Sam. Any matters from staff?
Chair Lindell, I do have a couple of items for you this evening. I wanted to remind the committee about the auction, which is taking place in 2 weeks on the 17th of June. The gates open at 8 a.m. and the auction begins at 9:30 a.m. And this is at the police impound lot at the intersection of South Meadows and Camino Entrada. We are having preview days for the public. They can go and view the equipment and vehicles that are going to be auctioned off. And those preview days are on June 15th and 16th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And one more note on the auction is just that I would encourage all of the counselors to go check it out, either on the auction day or the preview days or before that. It's quite a sight. I visited the site on Friday afternoon, and it's hard to describe it. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but line of garbage trucks and buses, lines of decommissioned police vehicles, wrecked motorcycles. Counselor Rivera, I think if you wanted to see those motorcycles, you would definitely not question why we were auctioning them off. They're definitely not fit to be driven at this stage. But just, it's quite the sight. So they would love to have you if anyone wants to come and visit. I asked if we should arrange a specific visit, and they encouraged everyone to just drop by. And members of the public are also able to go and, look at from outside the fence, look at all the equipment there. So I wanted to just make a plug. This is our last meeting before the auction occurs. So I wanted to remind everyone about that. And then I just wanted to give a brief update on staffing in the finance department. As we were just talking about with security, we also have a shortage of staff in the finance department. We have 15 vacancies currently, which puts us at 26.8% vacant. We have 2 staff members that are leaving this week, and we currently have 5 internal promotions and 1 external hire in the pipeline. I expect those all to go through this month. And then we conducted interviews last Thursday for the controller position. And I wanted to share that with you because I'm really encouraged by the pool that we got this time. This is the 4th time that we've advertised the controller position in 2023. We've interviewed 2 other times. One, we had 2 candidates. The second time we had 1 candidate, and all of the selected candidates withdrew prior to the offer stage. So this time, having 3 strong candidates, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to fill that key controller position. So I'm hoping to be back before you in the next couple of weeks with an announcement of a new controller. But I wanted to give you an update, and then of course recognize some of our new staff like Travis that have come on board over the last 6 months. It is a competitive job market out there, and as we all know, we're competing with organizations like Lanol that operate in a different way than we do. So I'm encouraged by what we're seeing in this latest list of eligible applicants for the controller position, and I hope that will continue as we see lists for other positions, including accounting manager. Travis has one coming up, the procurement analyst position. So we're continuing to recruit and looking to strike that balance between internal promotions and external hires so that we can develop our existing staff and build up our ranks to get that vacancy rate down. That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director. Matters from the committee? Matters from the real chair? None?
Thank you for covering. I'm all good.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Next meeting is Tuesday, June 20th, and we are adjourned.